So I want to start the next piece here. So what you have in front of you is a folder that has some resources in it. It's got a poem that I wrote for basically that curriculum program that you just saw. I'm going to give you some more details about that. It's got just a quick one-pager about understanding the difference between PTS and moral injury that might be helpful as you're about to design your intervention. It has some tools for measuring an intervention over on the other side. And so basically I got one folder per table. And so if y'all can share that, and I just need to get those back at the end of the day so that I can pass them on to the next class. And then the other thing that you have in front of you that Chaplain Davey passed out was basically a sheet that you're going to fill out that will walk down what a moral injury intervention, what some of the pieces and components of that would be. And so I'll tell you kind of what that's going to look like. But basically what I want to do is so often we go to conferences and we leave those conferences going, man, that was a lot of really good ideas. But you don't actually have time when you get back to your desk to actually think about those things and implement them. So we're building in some time so that you have some time to play around with these concepts while they're fresh in your head and allow you to think about what contextually might work for you. So one of the things that's interesting about moral injury is often I'll do a conference and I'll personally go attend a conference and I leave at the end going, that was all amazing information. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to be practical with any of this stuff. I've got like a lot of good head knowledge, but I don't have a lot of good, what do I go do now? And so an analogy that a buddy of mine uses who's a moral injury researcher out of BYU, his name is MC Ingerson, he said, people want you to give them a cookbook instruction on what they should be doing for moral injury. They want you to say, listen, if you add this much pepper, this much salt, this much chicken, this much cheese, this much noodles, when it all comes out at the end, you have created a moral injury pie and it's going to be fantastic and perfect for absolutely everyone. But that is not the way any of this stuff works, because I am not an expert at the places where you work. I am an expert at the place where I work. And you know, the traumas that might potentially happen where you are at probably don't happen at the place where I'm at. And so what I'm going to do instead is give you ingredients, and I'm going to expect you to be chefs that assemble all of these ingredients together to come up with something that's going to work in your context. Because whatever money-making product I could sell you, the 12-step moral injury program, is not going to work for your people. So I'm going to go through basically what the ingredients that I think are useful and successful, and then I want you to integrate your own disciplines into that stuff and add the things that you know are successful and work with people that you're already seeing. I guarantee you, all of you have seen people with moral injury. You may not have had the language for it, but you've seen folks with this stuff. And so now we're just going to walk through some ways that I've done it, and I'm going to give you some ingredients. So that program that you witnessed here, my curriculum, the way I frame that is I frame it as a spiritual retreat. And I wish I could actually read what I wrote there. That's really tiny. It's good. High. It's such a good phrase. I was so impressed with myself. Anyway, it says something to the effect of like high stakes recreation, low threat spirituality is how I framed it. So the idea being that we are going to the mountains and we're just going to say goodbye to this world for a couple days. And I purposefully drive to a place out in the North Carolina mountains where the cell phones just don't work very well, which just seems like Cannon Air Force Base to me. But so I get them far enough away from the base that if the phone goes off, they've had to inform their supervisors that they're going to be like 5 hours away. And if an emergency goes down, I would not be your best option to return back to base. But this is really important, and you know, I get my commanders to give buy-in so that they release their folks to go do this kind of as an alternate place of duty, and they are expected to be there. So I do meager accommodations. So if we're sleeping in bunk beds in groups of like 8, and then we go eat some really cruddy camp food, because we do it at like what essentially is like a teen camp. So we eat some really cruddy camp food, and we do it outside, and we have the fire at night, and you know, everything's a little bit dusty and a little bit dirty. And then we go and we do some challenging, like high octane, get your adrenaline pumping kind of stuff, like whitewater rafting. And there's these confidence courses that we go on, and these challenge towers that you can climb. And what does that sound like? Anybody? Bad accommodations, sleeping with a lot of other human beings. Maybe it smells a little bit funny. Like, what does that sound like? It's like a deployment. Weird that I would pick something that resembles a deployment for my deployment retreat. It's almost as if I had planned that, because it did. Okay, so team challenges. I do prioritize my enlisted folks and especially single folks. As you know, there is challenges in getting money to spend on singles. And so this is one of the ways that I try to fill that gap, is that I use this program in particular to do that. The other thing I know about my single folks is they're less likely to have that built-in social support structure. And so I'm going to build them a social support structure over the weekend. They don't know that's what I'm doing, but that's what I'm doing. 10 participants max for my thing. I can't do more than 10 people. Like I do not have the capability to do that, and I've been doing this for years. And I've realized that once I get to like the 15 range, it just gets weird. And it's not intimate anymore, and it's not a trusting circle. And things like, gentlemen, and you did it up here, so I assume you didn't, you knew what was happening in the front. But did you see how these guys paired off after that and started talking? Like, I have no idea what you talked about, but they built some kind of social support structure there where one cared for the other and the other returned it. And something happened magic in that moment because I just gave them the opportunity to be together in community. And I didn't have to do anything to create that. And it seemed like you were both in there, right? I have no idea what was going on, but you were both engaged in there. All right, so the assessments you see, I use the PCL5 and the PTGI. I use my Ready to Return curriculum with the narratives and the storytelling. I am always looking for creative ways to get to the edge of these issues without actually going there itself. So the whiteboards work really well. If you've been down to the JSOW course with JE, he uses Legos. I didn't know what I thought about Legos at first, but now I use Legos on a regular basis. I literally did a racial reconciliation retreat with Legos with a group of folks who were from very, very different backgrounds. And we didn't fight. We didn't argue. We just talked about Legos and learned about each other's stories. And people were hugging and crying and everything by the end of the thing and hugging necks. And it was fantastic. And it was Legos. Anyway, so I'm looking at creative ways to get people to do something that's tactfully engaged. Videos, so there are all kinds of videos that you can pull clips from. Basically, if you jump on YouTube and look for video clips that might have to do with PTSD, 90% of the time you could probably also use them for moral injury. I've got a bunch that I use over the course of time, but after you start to see this stuff everywhere, you just start to add to your collection of potential clips that you might show, and then you run across one like the Obi-Wan thing that people just seem to resonate with, and so I show that one on a regular basis. The 4 steps to re-examine, reframe, ritual, and reconnect, obviously is part of what I do. I invite alumni to come back to that because it becomes incredibly meaningful for somebody who went through that process once before to come back. And so I kind of go, hey man, you know what we're getting after here? And they're like, yep, sure do, chaps. And so they'll be often the ones that opens up the room to the trusting story. And then I don't have to do I don't have to like pull that out of anybody. I don't have to force anything at all, which I'm not doing that anyway. But rather than everybody not really knowing what we're doing, all of a sudden somebody has really set the tone for this thing. So I'm happy to have an alumni come back to every one of my sessions. And then I've got a schedule which is inside that POAM, so every table should have a folder, except I think this table, I did not get you a folder. Here it is. And so you can see the schedule that I use and how many hours I devote to each thing. But literally I have, you guys don't have one, we'll figure that out in a second. I literally have 3 hours of official curriculum. There are only 3 hours of teaching curriculum, but in reality, I have curriculum everywhere. I am doing team building. We're going to the fire pit at night. When we do the whitewater rafting, there is a challenge where you are jumping off a rock that is crazy high up into the river with nobody there to catch you, and it's freezing cold, and we all do this thing like, oh man, you can do this, you know, and then and we all go do it together, and we conquer some fears, and we're cheering everybody on, and all of that stuff is the actual curriculum. I just have that 3-hour intervention piece of it. So you don't have to, you don't have to go out and write a full weekend seminar of things to do. What we're really looking to do is figure out where the insertion points are and how you can create something in your context where you're building that social support that's so important. We do this high swing thing here, so there's basically a swing where they just raise you as far as humanly possible in the air and just catapult you down. And there's 2 versions of the swing. One is a 3-person, and the other is a single person. And so I think all but one of my participants that I've taken over the years has done both of those swings. And I would say upwards of like 60% of the people who get there don't want to do that, and they look at it and they're like, there's no way I'm ever doing that. And before you know it, in this trusting environment, somebody goes, I'll go with you. And then we get them on the 3-person swing. And then after we get them on the 3-person swing, they're like, it wasn't so bad. I'm going to do the 1-person swing, right? So we got group challenges, we got individual challenges. Is this all making sense? You know, we're building all kinds of things here. All right. So here's your task. Craft an intervention with your unique unit in mind. Here are some of the milestones that you're going to want to capture. So I want your intervention to be moral injury focused. I want it to have some spiritual component, and of course that can develop depending on where you're at and what your particular discipline is, but make sure you're keeping spiritual in mind. It should be in group interactions. What I'd like you to do is ultimately do enough work where you can go get money to fund this intervention, right? That's why I want you to spend some time thinking about it. I want you to think about the data that you're going to need to collect so that you can prove that it works. And then you can use the ready-to-return model, which I'll pop back up on the screen, which was that four-arrow model to give you some places where you can work people through. And it's not like you have to use every one of those arrows, but I want you to think specifically about maybe 1, 2, or 3 of those arrows that you're going to try to incorporate in your event. Okay, so what are some of the contexts where you might be able to use it? So weekend retreats, somewhere in the training pipeline, something that focuses on single military members in particular. Post-deployment is the one that I gravitate to because it just seems innocuous. I'm not making any statements about where people are in life. I'm just, we all deploy and we all have things to do after we deploy. This is one of them, and I want to offer you an opportunity. It's almost like it's a privilege for them to go on my weekend event. Like, you know, what I call marking events. When we go out and so at Herbie, right, Ratchet 3.3 was one of the planes that we lost. And so we would find a way over and over again to memorialize that event every year. And so some years we go on a 3.3-mile run. Some years we would go have a service down at the air park. We would just find something to do on these marking events. And what we're doing is we're doing ritual together and we're doing community together. And so, you know, hitting those kind of pieces of this, the Ready to Return model. And then a Bible study book group, you know, you could take a book like Nancy Sherman's After War or Tribe or one of these things, and you could then figure out how would you build like a study group around that where you'd have people read a chapter every week and come back, and that would give you something to keep the conversations moving forward. So those are some of the particular contexts that might be good starters for you, but honestly, you're going to know as well as I do what might work or what might not work in your unit. Okay, so here are the ingredients, and I will share this. So we had at one of the events, we had a maintenance guy build an airplane, and as you start to look at the airplane, what do you notice about the landing gear? Can you see it from where you're at? Yeah. There's a person here, there's a person here, and there's a person here. And what you can't see is it's the little white skeleton heads rather than the yellow heads. And I started asking questions, you know, about that. And basically, this person, and if you also notice they're not standing up straight, they're leaning over. And so you start asking questions, and it's like, yeah, I feel like I'm about to topple. And I think the original prodding question was like, hey, can you build something that represents a typical Monday morning for you? And it was like, I feel like I'm about to topple, but I feel like if I fall, that my unit is going to come crashing to the ground. And so just this real idea that this person was carrying the weight of their world on their shoulders. I'm not sure if they would have ever expressed that without Legos. And so these Legos things are a really interesting way to get at some of this stuff. If you're interested in that, there's a Lego Serious Play certification that you can get. I use it on a regular basis. I know there's some other folks in the room that have used it. And a lot of times I can get people to talk who would never talk to me in real life about really meaningful things, but I have them build a model and I ask them questions about this thing in their hand, and they will tell you all sorts of things because they're just telling you what they already built and what's sitting there. All right, so here's some ingredients, right? So not a cookbook, but some ingredients. Prepare broadly. If you noticed, I had a stack of books, watching media, collecting news articles, just trying to, every time you get an opportunity to see a place where moral injury exists, just prepare broadly, because when I do these interventions up here, you don't know, but I got a whole bunch of stuff in my box because I had no idea what we were going to do. And so we started with some whiteboards because I just felt like that was a good place to go. But I've also got a little Lego activity in there. I've also got some quotes from some books in there because I just didn't know what was going to happen. And so this is really dangerous. You're kind of living on the edge, and it might look kind of silly. But I can tell you every time it's worked out fantastically, and everybody's really gracious to you because they don't get a chance to talk about this stuff, and they really respect you for giving them an opportunity. So prepare broadly in all sorts of contexts. Collect resources, right? So those newspaper articles, those clippings, figuring out a way to have an article or that story that we read that is far enough away that creates some distance. Like, it took me a while to kind of get the right articles to stick in my intervention itself. Build group trust. If this group trust doesn't exist by the time you get these people in a circle, you're not going anywhere. And so if you don't have that group trust there, you might as well just dismiss that because you might do more harm than good. But what I've found is that most people generally are pretty friendly and pretty good to each other. They're usually fairly kind human beings. And if you give them just a little bit of push in the right direction, for the most part, they're going to figure out how to build that social structure. But just make sure that that's there before you start asking questions. You may have to set the tone in terms of a non-judgmental atmosphere. So as Jonathan Shea said, right, like, you can't let the people get into pissing contests. And so sometimes I may tell a story or something that expresses that. I might, if I feel like we're getting into a place where people are starting to compare, I might pull out the Legos, and I've got an item that I do where I give them all the same pieces of Lego, and I ask them to build something, and they all build something that looks completely different. And then we talk about how the perspective we all bring on life gets us all to the same sort of solutions, but we see things from different angles. And so we might just be misunderstanding the way that somebody else sees it. So you just never know what you might need to be ready for here. Engage creativity. We want you to be spiritually attentive. We want to give lots of space for reflection, right? So if you have an hour and only an hour, I would only schedule like 35 minutes of that, because people are going to want to tell their stories. And it just happens every time. Even when we do a boring seminar group like this, somebody is going to tell their story because there are so few places to do it. And so we just have to create enough space and time frame and flexibility where I could just throw away half my curriculum. If we get to Sunday and we've only done half my curriculum, but we've had a good week, I don't care. It doesn't matter, right? That's fine. We've done what we needed to do. Remaining flexible, you need to measure your effectiveness, and hopefully at the end of that you come out with some sort of meaningful intervention. All right. Questions? Because I'm about to put you all to work, and then you're going to have to, we may have some folks share them with other people, so that everybody's accountable and gets some good work in and doesn't just turn to their neighbor and talk. Okay? Because we're all talky people. I get it. It's fine. All right. Off you go. Let me know if you have questions. Oh, in the folder, I think I explained the resources already, but in the folder you should have those, you should have surveys. You should have my poem. You have a quick explainer about the difference between moral injury and PTS, and a few other resources in there as well. All right. Off you go. Let me know if you have questions.